کہ تمام اندرونی اور بیرونی چیلنجز کے سامنے بنیاد مرصوص بن کر کھڑے ہیں۔ افغان طالبان رجیم گمراہ کن غیر منطقی پالیسی پر عمل پیرا۔ پاکستان کے خلاف افغانستان میں عام شہریوں کو نشانہ بنانے کا بیانیہ منظم ڈس انفارمیشن مہم کا حصہ ہے۔ اپنی ناکامیوں سے توجہ ہٹانے کے لیے خود کو مظلوم پیش کرنے کا ڈرامہ رچایا جا رہا ہے۔ کور کمانڈرز کانفرنس کا دو ٹوک موقف۔
فیلڈ مارشل سید عاصم منیر کی صدارت میں فورم کا شہداء کی لازوال قربانیوں کو خراج عقیدت، علاقائی کشیدگی سے بچاؤ اور تحمل اختیار کرنے کی اہمیت پر زور، خطے میں استحکام کے فروغ اور صورتحال کو مزید خراب ہونے سے روکنے کی کوششوں کی حمایت کی گئی۔
قومی اتحاد، اجتماعی عزم اور ملکی خود مختاری کا غیر متزلزل عہد، مارکہ حق۔ تمام اندرونی اور بیرونی چیلنجز کا مقابلہ کرنے کے لیے ہم ہیں بنیانم مرصوص۔ دشمن کے خلاف عظیم فتح کو 1 سال مکمل۔ کور کمانڈرز کانفرنس میں فیلڈ مارشل سید عاصم منیر نے پوری قوم اور مسلح افواج کو مبارکباد دی۔ ابھرتے خطرات کے پیش نظر مستعدی اور آپریشنل تیاریوں کا اعلیٰ سطح کا معیار برقرار رکھنے پر زور۔ فورم نے واضح کیا، قومی سطح پر مارکہ حق کی یاد منانا بھارتی متکبرانہ سوچ کے لیے واضح پیغام ہے۔ پاکستان قوم متحد، مضبوط اور ہر لحاظ سے تیار ہے۔ کور کمانڈرز کانفرنس میں نشاندہی کی گئی کہ افغان طالبان رجیم گمراہ کن اور غیر منطقی پالیسی پر عمل پیرا ہیں۔ پاکستان کے خلاف افغانستان میں عام شہریوں کو نشانہ بنانے کا بیانیہ ان کی منظم ڈس انفارمیشن مہم کا حصہ ہے۔ یہ ناکامیوں سے توجہ ہٹانے کے لیے خود کو مظلوم پیش کرنے کا ڈرامہ رچا رہے ہیں۔ افغان طالبان حکومت خوارج اور دیگر دہشت گرد تنظیموں کو محفوظ پناہ گاہیں فراہم کر رہی ہے۔ افغان طالبان رجیم کی جانب سے دہشت گردوں کی سپورٹ افغان عوام کے مفادات کے منافی ہیں۔ اقتدار پر قابض ٹولہ اپنے عوام کے سامنے بے نقاب ہو چکا۔ کور کمانڈرز کانفرنس نے علاقائی سلامتی کی صورتحال کا جائزہ لیتے ہوئے واضح کیا، کوئی بھی جیو پولیٹیکل پیش رفت علاقائی استحکام پر اثر ڈال سکتی ہے۔ فریقین کشیدگی سے بچاؤ اور تحمل کی راہ اختیار کریں۔ پاکستان خطے میں استحکام کے فروغ اور صورتحال کو مزید خراب ہونے سے روکنے کی کوششوں کی حمایت کرتا ہے۔ فورم نے مقبوضہ جموں و کشمیر میں جاری مظالم، ماورائے عدالت قتل اور آبادیاتی تبدیلیوں کی شدید
بھارت مارکہ حق میں پاکستان کی خاتون تاریخی شکست سے سبق سیکھے، پانی کو بطور ہتھیار استعمال کرنے کی کوشش دوبارہ نہ کرے۔ دشمن یاد رکھے، ہمارے حصے کا پانی روکنے کی کوشش جنگ تصور ہوگی۔ نائب وزیر اعظم اسحاق ڈار نے خبردار کر دیا۔ اسلام آباد میں سفیر اور ڈپلومیٹک کورٹ سے خطاب میں کہا کہ امید ہے کہ ایران امریکہ جنگ کے مکمل خاتمے کے لیے مذاکرات جلد مکمل ہو جائیں گے۔
It marks a historic moment when our brave armed forces, with the resolute support of the entire nation, valiantly defended the sovereignty and the territorial integrity of Pakistan against unprovoked Indian aggression. India will draw the appropriate lessons from the events surrounding its actions and Pakistan's response under Marka Haq. Any attempt to stop or divert the flow of water belonging to Pakistan under the Indus Waters Treaty will be considered as an act of war. We are very hopeful that the Islamabad talks, which represent an important diplomatic breakthrough, as I said, after 47 years, and we still hope that it will eventually and hopefully very soon conclude.
بھارت نے پاکستان کا پانی روکا تو بگلہار ڈیم کو نشانہ بنایا جا سکتا ہے۔ مشیر وزیر اعظم رانا ثناءاللہ کی پروگرام ندیم ملک لائیو میں گفتگو، کہا پانی کے ذخائر بنانے سے متعلق حکمت عملی بنا لی، سندھ اور پنجاب نے طے کرنا ہے کہ پانی کے ذخائر بنائے جائیں۔
وار مین ایکٹ آف وار، پانی کو روکنے کی وہ جو کوشش ہوگی اس کوشش کو جو ہے وہ ڈیفیوز کیا جائے گا۔
کوشش ڈیفیوز کرنے کا مطلب یہ ہے کہ آپ اس کے بگلیہار ڈیم کو ہٹ کریں؟
جی بالکل، اس میں جو ہے وہ یہ ہو سکتا ہے جناب، جو ہے وہ اس کے اوپر وہ کوئی 4-5 چھوٹے ڈیم جو ہے وہ تعمیر کرنے جا رہے ہیں، اس طرح سے وہ ویپنائز کر رہے ہیں واٹر کو۔ ہم بھی جو ہے وہ 3-4 جگہ پہ واٹر ریزروائر جو ہے وہ ہم تیار کر لیں۔ اس کے اوپر پریزیڈنٹ صاحب سے ہماری ایک میٹنگ بھی ہوئی تھی۔ تو اب اس میں یہ ہے کہ یہ سندھ اور پنجاب نے آپس میں یہ طے کرنا ہے کہ یہ ریزروائر جو ہے یہ بنائے جائیں۔ اگر یہ ایسا ہو جائے پھر وہ ویپنائز نہیں کر سکے گا۔
امریکی وزیر خارجہ مارکو روبیو وائٹ ہاؤس میں پریس کانفرنس کر رہے ہیں، آپ کو لیے چلتے ہیں۔
That is credible, verifiable, and that would lead to an immediate de-escalation?
Well, look, this is a long-standing problem for them, right? I mean, they have always said they don't want a nuclear weapon. That's because they've always said that, they just don't mean it. And why do you say, well, how do you know they don't mean it? Well, we don't mean it because they're doing all the things, and historically have tried to do all the things that you do if you want a nuclear weapons program. For example, they innovate and try to innovate long-range delivery missiles that now, in some cases, are capable of reaching much of Europe. They build these large underground centrifuges for enrichment activity. There are countries in the world that are involved in the enrichment business, but these guys do it in mountains and in caves and in hiding. They've always had secret components of their nuclear program undisclosed to the world. And we know for a fact that they retain highly enriched uranium at 60%, that they did so. And that has no civilian use, none, zero whatsoever. So they have an opportunity here to agree to something that will make it clear that they're not interested in a nuclear. One thing is to say we don't want a nuclear weapon. Another thing is to do the things that prove you don't want a nuclear weapon. By the way, if what Iran wants is a civilian nuclear program for power plants and stuff like that, there are a lot of countries in the world that have that, and they don't enrich. They import the enriched material. You know, they could have that if that's what they wanted, but they're not acting like that's what they wanted. They're acting like they want a military, nuclear program. That's unacceptable. So that's the process we're engaged in now. To create, that's the object of this diplomacy, is to come up with some level of understanding about what are the topics that they've agreed to negotiate on. We don't have to have the actual agreement written out, and one day this is highly complex and highly technical. But we have to have a diplomatic solution that is very clear about the topics that they are willing to negotiate on and the extent and the concessions they're willing to make at the front end in order to make those talks worthwhile. That's what Stephen Jarrett and the whole team is working on, and I hope to have good news on it. That's the outcome we would prefer. That's the outcome we would have preferred a year ago. That's the outcome I think most of us would have preferred a long time ago. But that's not the option they've given us, given their activity. All right, there's no way I can figure out who to call on. I'm just going to press right in the middle, right there, you right there, yeah. Right in the back row.
Thank you, Mr. President.
I'll go to you next. I can't get everyone, you know that. All right, go ahead.
Thank you, Secretary Rubio.
Keep going right.
Welcome to the White House.
What's
You're
that?
talking to me, sir?
Yeah, to you, yes, sir.
Thank you. I have two questions on two separate issues that come
Do they
under...
get two questions for these?
Two questions.
There's a lot of people in here.
That fall under your umbrella.
All right, well, you can ask me two questions, I'll give you one answer. Go
Thank
ahead.
you very much.
And I'll pick the one I like better.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. The first has to do with the blockade. There are lawmakers from both parties who claim the blockade is an act of war. What do you say to that? And my second question has to do with the fuel embargo of Cuba. How long, Mr. Secretary, will that last?
Okay, two things. All right, good. I'll answer both your questions because I like the second one too. The first one on the blockade. And so why do we have a blockade? We have a blockade because they shut down the straits. So I don't know which members of Congress you're talking to, but here's what I would ask them. I would ask everybody here. It's very simple. These guys have shut down the Straits of Hormuz. This is what Iran is saying. We will shut down the straits. No one can go through. No country in the world can go through unless we allow you to go through, and you have to pay us. But our ships can go through, meaning the Iranian ships, as much as they want. That's crazy. Who would agree to that? So how are we going to have a situation where they get to close the straits to everybody, and the only people who are allowed to go through there 100% without paying anything are the Iranians? If you do that, they'll keep the straits closed forever. They're trying to make this some new normal. Okay, under no circumstances can we ever allow them to normalize the fact that they get to blow up commercial ships and put mines in the water. So the response to that is we're going to blockade your ships. If everyone's ships are not getting out, your ships are not getting out either. That's not an act of war. That's a defensive measure. It's a counter to what they have decided to do. You know what is an act of war? Putting mines in the water. Why don't the members of Congress, whoever it is complaining about it, they should be all over that. These guys put mines in the water. That alone, mining in the water is illegal, period, under any circumstances, and they've done it. But this is crazy stuff, but this is what they've done. On Cuba, oil blockade on Cuba. There's no oil blockade on Cuba per se. Here's what's happening with Cuba, okay? Cuba used to get free oil from Venezuela. Used to give them a bunch of free oil. They would take like 60% of that oil and resell it for cash. It wouldn't even go to benefit the people. So the only blockade that's happened is the the Venezuelans have decided we're not giving you free oil anymore. And you can only imagine nowadays, the way oil prices are, no one's giving away free oil, much less to a failed regime. So the problem with Cuba is worse, okay? Their economic model doesn't work. And the people who are in charge can't fix it. And the reason that I can't fix it is not just because they're communists, that's bad enough, but they're incompetent communists. The only thing worse than a communist is an incompetent one. And that's what, so incompetent communists run that country, they don't know how to fix it. They really don't. And we have 90 miles from our shores, a failed state that also happens to be friendly territory for some of our adversaries. So it's an unacceptable status quo, and we'll be addressing it, but not today. Okay. All right, let's go to the front, right there.
Secretary Rubio.
Yeah.
You are going to the Vatican to meet with the Pope. Is this an attempt to smooth things over with the Pope, given the rhetoric between President Trump and Pope Leo?
No, I mean, it's a trip we had planned from before, and obviously we had some stuff that happened. And no, look, there's a lot to talk about with the Vatican. I'll give you one example. The Pope just returned from a trip to Africa, where the church is growing very vibrantly. And we have shared concerns about religious freedom, freedom in different parts of the world. We'd love to talk to them about that. The topic of Cuba, you know, we gave Cuba $6 million of humanitarian aid, but obviously they won't let us distribute it. We distributed it through the church. We'd like to do more. We're willing to give more humanitarian aid to Cuba, by the way, distributed through the church, but the Cuban regime has to allow us to do it. They won't allow us to give their own people more humanitarian aid, and we're willing to do it through the church. So there's a lot to talk about.
And the president recently said that the Pope is endangering a lot of Catholics as a result of his rhetoric around the Iran war. Is that a sentiment?
Well, I don't think that's an accurate description of what he said. I think what the president basically said is that Iran can't have a nuclear weapon because they would use it against places that have a lot of Catholics and Christians and others for that matter. It goes back to the central point. I think the president, without trying to speak for him, but I think I can characterize it this way. He doesn't understand why anybody, leave aside the Pope, the president, and I, for that matter, I think most people, I cannot understand why anyone would think that it's a good idea for Iran to ever have a nuclear weapon. Look what they're doing with the Straits right now. They're holding the whole world hostage. They have these sailors, you know, on commercial ships that are going to starve to death out there. They don't care. They don't care that this is melting down the economies around the world, even of their own allies. This is what they're doing with the Straits. What do you think they would do if they had a nuclear weapon? They would hold the world hostage with that nuclear weapon. That's what they would do. They would do exactly to the world with a nuclear weapon what they're doing now with the Straits. And I think the president's point is how anyone cannot see that as an unacceptable outcome and an unacceptable risk is beyond him. It's puzzling. And someone has to do something about it. The difference between this president and like the 6 presidents that preceded him were that he's the only one that's actually been willing to do something about it. Everyone says Iran can't have a nuclear weapon, but you got to do something about it at some point. And he's been willing to address that threat. And that's what he promised he would do when he got elected, by the way, is address threats like this. I wish I knew your names, guys. I apologize. Can you put name tags on?
Thank you so much, Mr. Secretary.
Who are you with? Who are you with?
I'm with Rubio Media Network.
Okay.
Mr. Secretary, the president has said multiple times that weapons were provided to the Kurdish groups to pass on the Iranian people. However, Kurdish political parties and the regional government says they have not received such weapons. Even some claim these weapons remain.
अमरीकी वज़ीर ख़ारजा मार्को रूबियो प्रेस कॉन्फ्रेंस कर रहे हैं। उन्होंने ये कहा है कि ईरान को मुज़ाकरात की मेज़ पर आकर मुतालबात मानना होंगे। अमरीका समुद्री आमदोरफ्त बहाल करने की कोशिशें जारी रखेगा।
ईरान पर हमला ना करता तो इसराइल और मशरक़ वस्ता का खात्मा हो जाता, जिसके बाद यूरोप और फिर अमेरिका की बारी आती। अमेरिकी सदर ट्रंप की व्हाइट हाउस में मीडिया टॉक, कहा हम ईरान को जौहरी हथियार बनाने नहीं देंगे। ईरान को अक्लमंदी का रास्ता इख्तियार करना चाहिए। मैं वहाँ के लोगों को कत्ल करना नहीं चाहता। सदर ट्रंप ने कहा ईरानी हमारे साथ गेम खेल रहे हैं, लेकिन वो मुआहिदा भी करना चाहते हैं।
And maybe we wouldn't all be here right now. I can tell you the Middle East would have been gone, Israel would have been gone, and they would have trained their sights on Europe first and then us. We're not going to let lunatics have a nuclear weapon. What I don't like about Iran is they'll talk to me with such great respect, and then they'll go on television, they'll say, we did not speak to the president. We did not. I just spoke to, we did not speak to the president. So they play games, but let me just tell you, they want to make a deal. They should do the smart thing, and because we don't want to go in and kill people, we really don't.